everyone, today I will be reviewing Redeployment by Klay. So many of you had requested for me to go ahead and review this once I finished it. I initially was really interested in this because I realized that aside from kind of stereotypically reading the things they carried when I was in high school, I really haven't read many books concerning the military or war. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I'm an Army brat. That doesn't mean I'm an asshole. That means my parents were in the Army and I moved a fair amount growing up. That's how my parents met. So although I know what it's like to be a child growing up in military family and on bases, well, not bases, I think bases is Marines, posts is Army. My knowledge of the military outside of that is fairly low, which makes it feel a bit bad. So I was really interested initially going into this basically just to learn a bit more and hear different perspectives. Now when I first heard of this, I thought it was someone's nonfiction account of their time in Iraq, but there's actually 12 fictional short stories. Klay went to Dartmouth and then he was in Iraq during the surge for 13 months where he worked as a public affairs officer. And I was watching some interviews and reading some interviews with him, and one thing he said was, a lot of people don't think about this, but so much of someone's view and outlook on the war and their experience is just dictated by what job they had. And with his, he was able to see and meet a wide variety of people and hear about their experiences. So he's able to really delve into those in these 12 stories. Now, not saying that obviously those 12 stories are direct accounts of people he talked to or anything like that, but I'm sure he's able to pull from the things he saw and the people he met. The stories are all told in the first person, and there's a wide variety of people. For instance, you have a chaplain. Then one of my favorite stories was actually, I think he was a foreign service officer who doesn't really support the war, and that story was surprisingly very funny. What was that called? That was money as a weapon system. And that was one thing I was surprised about this book. There is some humor thrown in there, which I think is necessary in a book like this, if that makes sense. And then there are the ones that are much more serious. For instance, the first story is just called Redeployment, and I mean the first line says, "We shot dogs, not by accident. We did it on purpose and we called it Operation Scooby." I'm a dog person, so I thought about that a lot. The writing in this is wonderful. It's a very upfront and very honest and visceral portrayal of the war and what it is not only to be in war, but particularly about the difficulty of coming home and then trying to communicate those experiences to people like us. That is definitely one of the major themes of this book. For instance, there's a guy who has returned back to the States and now he's a student out of school and he's trying to communicate what it was to a fellow student that he kind of likes. It's definitely not a sappy or kind of overly sentimental view on the war. And I think he kind of presents the psychological consequences of trying to come home and integrate really well. It's not that kind of single-minded view on PTSD that you get in a lot of, say, like Lifetime movies. One thing I was also worried about going into this that I thought was handled really well was political views about the war. I was worried that it would be really heavy-handed and all you would be able to hear was Klay's view on whether or not we should have gone to war, but all of the characters have different views on why they're there and whether or not the war was necessary to happen. One thing I thought was interesting was a lot of the characters actually have kind of almost this ambivalent view on not only for the war itself, but their reason for being there. The dialogue in particular was probably one of my favorite parts of the book. I thought that was done really well. And you'll also come out of this, I should point out, I bookmarked this as a little playing card, but you'll come out of this knowing a lot of military terminology. For instance, I thought this was a good page to show. I don't know if that's focusing, but you can see for a lot of these things, if I happen to be next to my parents, I would just say, what does that mean? If not, I would just Google it. So you definitely come out of this learning quite a lot. And I thought I would go ahead and end this review on reading a little thing I found in an interview about why he actually wrote the book. He said, "What I really want, and I think what a lot of veterans want, is a sense of serious engagement with the wars, because it's important, because it matters, because lives are at stake, and it's something we did as a nation. That's something that deserves to be thought about very seriously and very honestly, without resorting to the sort of comforting stories that allow us to tie a bow on the experience and move on." So overall, I would give Redeployment by Klay a 5 out of 5 stars. You guys know that's a lot coming from me. I don't give that to books very often, and generally when I'm recommending a book, I'm just saying I think you guys would like this. I think you should go ahead and read this, but this isn't a case where I'm just like, I think you'd like the book. It's a case where I really think everybody should read this. Because one thing, like I said, is in the book and that he talks about a lot in his interviews is this idea that veterans come home and they have this difficulty with communicating the war to us, and we kind of also have this difficulty with trying to communicate with them. And so like I said, definitely go ahead and check this out. Let me know if you have read this and what you thought about this. Also, if you've read any other books about being in the military that you would recommend, and I'll see you guys soon.